The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome to episode 81 of The Things We All Carry. Gandhi said that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Jess Rambo is a creative force behind the Painted Buffalo. She's a Marine Corps veteran who has taken her artistic skill and passion and applied it to the veterans community. Her love of art and love for veterans meets in the middle to create opportunities for vets to tell their stories. It doesn't matter if the stories are ever heard by anyone else. It simply matters that they are able to express themselves. Jess hit the road at the beginning of COVID in a school bus she renovated for her family to live in. Along the way, they hit 38 states, 30 national parks, and over 300 meetups for veterans, all the while meeting over 1,200 individual veterans. Her paint can project provides veterans with socks, water bottles, shirts, and art supplies meant to encourage them to open up, begin a journey, and tell their story. Today, Jess and her children called North Georgia home. She has an even larger and more grandiose vision of what her service can become. She is creating a homestead for her family, her animals, and the veterans to commune, create, and connect. Jess has lost herself in the service of others, and we all benefit from the self she's finding anew. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes, but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show. If you're ready, we can just have a conversation.
Let's have it.
All right, perfect. All right, well, welcome back to The Things We All Carry. Today I have Jess Rambo, and she is the Painted Buffalo, and you can find her on Instagram. That's where I found her, and she's got a pretty interesting story. She's doing a lot for veterans, and I'm going to kind of let her get into that, but I want to ask her about, first I want to ask her about a song. What's the last song you heard?
The last song, I'm editing a YouTube video right now, and my cousin Travis is a musician, and my intro is his song called The Great Divide. And it talks about a lot of the stuff that I've gone through in my career, and he as well. So The Great Divide by Travis Shallow.
Perfect. You got a shout out for him too. That's perfect. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great. I broke my favorite coffee mug, but so far so good.
Okay. And a little word of warning to anybody watching the video, or maybe if the audio breaks up as well, we're both on kind of spotty internet right now, so we're going to make the best of it. So bear with us.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a pretty large military family. That's where this whole story kind of starts. My mom was she did 6 years in the Navy and 14 years in the Coast Guard. So my entire life. And she has 5 brothers, and all of them served in the military. My 2 favorite uncles, Tom and Jim, were both Marines, and they were during Vietnam, and they had the coolest war stories and all of that kind of stuff. So when I was growing up, I was like, I'm going to be a Marine. I'm going to do the cool stuff. Nobody really told me you're a girl and you don't really get to do those cool things. But over time and all of that, you kind of, start to realize that. So the year my mom retired from the military, I joined the Marine Corps on a whim. I just walked into the recruiter's office of the Marines and said, I want to join the Marine Corps, and signed my life away right there.
Was that right after high school?
Yep. So it was, I guess, about the year after I graduated. I did 2 semesters, a promise to my mom to try college. I told her she was wasting her money. And so the second semester, the last day, I left and joined the Marine Corps.
And you go to Parris Island?
All female Marines. Now they've changed it.
Okay.
But in 2006, and before all of that, all female Marines went to Parris Island.
Okay. Yeah, that Marine Corps is something that I know from a periphery, but I was in the Army, so I don't know as much about the Marine Corps as maybe I should. So that's good to know. I know that when I was in the Army, I trained, my basic training was at Fort Bliss, and it was all males just because of the setting. And I know, I mean, that's changed a lot because of, I don't even think they do basic at Fort Bliss anymore. So I think they've narrowed it down to a few spots only.
Yeah, no, kind of know of the Marine Corps bubble. I hear here and there, I'll read articles and stuff, but now I think boot camp for the Marines is integrated, but it's a trial and error. And the Marine Commandant and all of that really fought hard not to become integrated, but all other branches of services are. So, eventually we followed in line as well.
It makes sense. I mean, you're going to serve together, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons with everything, but that is the one pro that I have told people when they talk about that is if you're not training as you fight, then, a lot of these issues are going to come up, especially with sexual assault and harassment and all of those kinds of things that, people are starting to talk about more openly. Though that is a problem, but no matter if you're training, together or not, those things happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, like you said, very unfortunate. So tell me about your Marine Corps journey.
Yeah.
How does that progress for you?
So in 2006, I joined the Marine Corps. I went to Paris Island and trained there. And I signed a media contract before I left. So I could have been combat camera or public affairs. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do in the military before I even got there, especially from being, a big military family. I hear a lot of, well, I didn't even know that existed, or I didn't know you could pick your MOS or those kinds of things. And thankfully I had the background and the privilege to be able to not go in so blind. The military as a whole is, that way, but the Marine Corps as a whole other beast. So sometimes that, people will be like, well, in the Army or in the Coast Guard, like my mom or something like that, this is how we did it. And, talking to her, I'd be like, yeah, I know that is what is written down in the rule book, but that's not what's happening here, and those kinds of differences and stuff. So I joined the Marine Corps in 2006, and I was a combat cameraman. So I went in as a basic lithographer. So in your training books, you have those doodles and, weapon systems broken down and all of that kind of stuff. That was my job, is to draw those doodles and kind of make visual representation of the, green knowledge books and all of that kind of stuff. And when I got to my first duty station, Marfor Pac, which is in Hawaii, they were like, yeah, we don't do that here. So very quickly, I was out of, my basic job and had to learn graphics and photo and video and become an all around combat cameraman. And in that way, I was able to go overseas and all of that kind of stuff, because there's not very many graphic Marines that get to go off and do fun worldly adventures
I can
unless you
imagine.
have a photo or a video camera with you. So I very quickly learned that to go overseas and to do the job I wanted to do, you needed a camera in your hand. So quickly learned that and became efficient. So that's what I did for 10 years. I was a combat cameraman. In 2010, I got in a really bad car accident and I broke my pelvis and had a couple hip surgeries and stuff like that. And fought the command about staying in, but eventually I got medically separated from my injuries. And all of that comes with, an opiate addiction and coping mechanisms that they don't really teach you and all of that kind of stuff. And that's, although the Marine Corps and my time in the Marine Corps is a huge part of my story on social media started during my detox and getting clean and the transition back into being a human being again.
So I want to circle back though, because you mentioned you don't get to go do the fun stuff unless you have a camera in your hand. So
Yes.
what did you quote unquote get to do? Where did you head off to?
Yeah, so Marfor Pac is a joint command, and they are in charge of all of the Pacific West. So everything from Asia, Australia, California, Yuma, all of that, that was our kind of stomping ground. And so as a combat cameraman, if somebody's getting deployed or an exercise is happening, you get a photo and a video Marine tagging along, documenting exactly what's happening, whether it's in the Middle East or, training exercises, say Balikatan or Talisman Sabre in Australia or things like that. So I did a lot of joint documentation in Thailand, the Philippines, Japan, Korea, Mongolia, Nepal, Australia, all of those kinds of things, whether it was med caps and end caps, building buildings or helping orphanages or doing medical treatment or providing US aid during national disasters and that kind of stuff. So all of that kind of documentation, all the stuff that you don't really see on the news, the Marines are doing, that's what I was documenting. And it was during a time, obviously, during OIF, OEF. So, when Nepal's, tornado or earthquakes and all that kind of stuff, that wasn't really making national news, but the Marines were in there first to fight and providing US aid.
Yeah. So you think combat photographer, you don't think all the other extra stuff because you have this vision of a combat photographer right there in the trenches, so to speak, but it's so much more than that. And I guess the things you've seen and done just run the spectrum.
I mean, it's everything from promotion ceremonies to ISO prep photos, the photos you get, don't smile. This is the photo
Hmm.
we're showing on the news if you die, kind of stuff like that. And then, combat, all of that kind of stuff. And then, just grip and grins, the commandants visiting your base, those kinds of things, all the way to, Marines volunteering at orphanages or rebuilding bridges, during disasters or providing US aid or just having allies, with integration of troops and non-lethal weapons training and the kind of stuff. And that counterpart, you see, other countries providing aid during, combat conflict and stuff. But before that happens, there's training to figure out weapon systems and how do you, uh, you know, provide that ally system once you get there and you have to do all the training beforehand. So there's a lot of prep and steps and all that before you get, to there. And that's what I was documenting.
So you said your accident happens in 2010.
2010. Yep.
So do you mind kind of describing what happened and the situation?
Yep. So I was in garrison back home going to barracks duty on I-95 and my car got sideswiped by an 18-wheeler. I rolled my car 450 feet across I-95 heading to base Quantico. And at the time, when I got put in an ambulance, all that kind of stuff, got all the tests, and they said, "Oh, I don't know what happened, but you got Marine Force, you're fine." And I went about, my time. Over the time, come to find out, I had small little fractures and little tears in tendons and that kind of stuff. And the rigorous of Marine Corps,
Mm.
PT and all that kind of stuff. I was still maintaining, top notch PT standards and that kind of stuff. And over time, things started breaking and I kept going to medical and saying, there's something wrong with me and eventually being deemed, I don't know if the Army has this, like being deemed a malingerer, where you're just
No.
making up that you're hurt so that you don't have to train. And I wasn't that kind of person, but because I was like, no, there's something seriously wrong with me. And leadership wasn't really taking it seriously. Eventually, I tore both of my labrium in my hip sockets and I couldn't even walk. And I was rushed to the hospital and had double bilateral labial tear surgeries. And, then they were like, oh shit, you really are broken. So that was a few years it took for people to realize that I was injured. And so because I was so far gone in my injuries by then, there was no, PT and running again and that kind of stuff. So my service quickly ended after that.
And so because of the surgeries or prior to the surgeries, do you get prescribed opiate?
So after my car accident, going to medical, pain management is a whole section in military hospitals that you get sent to. And I went to pain management and physical therapy and all of those kinds of things. And that was the start. I was given cortisone shots, oh, you're just swelling, your body hasn't, been able to heal. So here's cortisone shots. So I was numb. And so then still running and
Mhm.
PTing, 2 or 3 times a day, the way that Marines tend to work out, especially if you're a go-ho Marine and top-notch PTer and that kind of stuff. And so although I was numb, I was internally really damaging my insides on my tendons and bones and that kind of stuff. And so I was numb, but still doing a lot of damage. So then when the cortisone shot would wear off, I would be in excruciating pain because my bones were, fractured and severing tendons and stuff like that. And so then I'd get another cortisone shot. And that was the cycle. And so pain management was a huge part of that. And I hope it's changing a little bit. I watched a few things in Congress and stuff about military medical stuff, but that was I'd walk out what I call on social media my candy bag, my brown bag full of bottles, and once or twice a month I'd go in and get a refill and continue that cycle. And it was only after I got out that I was able to cut all of that stuff down and have crazy stories with that kind of stuff and detoxing on my own. I highly don't recommend it, but it
No.
was death either way. And so I was like, I'm going to figure this out on my own and, detoxed in the belly of a retired school bus.
I was gonna say,
That's how
yeah. So you separate. What year do you separate?
2016.
And by that time, you're full on into an
Full on
addiction.
addicted. Yep.
And
Full on.
are they separating? Obviously, it's honorable discharge, but you're not medically retired, are you? Or
I'm
are you
not
because
medically
you're
retired. I'm medically separated,
right?
which is its whole own battle that I had to go through. With leadership, they write a letter of recommendation, and my leadership was not on my side. And so they wrote, velvet daggers. I don't know if they have that in the army,
No,
writing pro cons, writing, nice words, but little
gotcha.
slips in,
Right.
kind of
Disguising
situation.
the
And so
words, right?
Yep. So I was medically separated versus medically retired.
Do you want to explain the difference?
So medically separated is you get a disability rating only for the medical that you're being separated for. So for me, it was 2 hip surgeries, and that only rated at 10%. But if you're medically retired, you get your money that you've been making. So I was a sergeant, an E5. I would be making that money forever.
Right.
But because I was only separated at 10%, that's, $100 a month.
Right.
But then when you go through the VA system, that's a whole other, kind of situation. So your military compensation for your disability and your VA compensation are 2 different ones, and they add together in that weird kind of math system. So technically I'm 90% disabled. I'm going through the VA system to increase it, but that's 7 years worth of time now I've been out that I've been fighting for that last. It's not little, it's only 10%, but that 10% increase is a plethora of benefits that would, I've done my time, I'm retired, I'm doing my thing, but for my kids would be really helpful for them to have those benefits and to use them, whether it's college or,
Right.
Just being able to pay the mortgage properly, those kinds of things that would really help. So that last 10%, they hold on for dear life, but the VA system is a whole thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we could do a couple of episodes on what the VA does to veterans. So it's a nightmare
Absolutely.
at times. I mean, I've
And,
heard rumors.
I'm 7 years into the process, but there's still Vietnam veterans that are still fighting for, thank goodness for the PACT Act and those kinds of things. That's slowed my process down a little bit with the PACT Act going on. But those men deserve, their right in court and their right to their benefits and all of that. So I'll hold on for a little longer for them to be able to get what they deserve.
So you find yourself out. You find yourself with the beginning just a 10% rating for a disability, medically separated, and you find yourself with a pain pill addiction.
Yes.
So how long does that go on? How long do you stay with before you say, all right, I need to clean up?
So it was probably a good year and a half after I got out. I, in addiction is very selfish. So anybody that could possibly say, I think you have a problem, or, my kids are suffering, or this or that, nobody could tell me I had a problem. It's fine. It's prescribed. Like, I'm doing it
Right.
just fine. But one morning, my son, had said, Mom, could I not be late for school today? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, you're never late. But honestly, he was late every single day because I was sleeping in, or, couldn't wake up or anything. But come to find out, every day he was late, he was missing breakfast. And
Oh,
so he had to wait for lunch. And that conversation was my click. Everybody has that aha moment to get them out of whatever space they're in. And that conversation with my son, he was 6. Now he's 12. That conversation was my time to go to the doctor and say, I need some help. I'm in it pretty thick.
so you go to the doc, and what does he or she say?
So I go to the VA, and the VA, the type of medication that I was on, they were like, you're on it forever. I mean, you look up any of these medications, highly addictive, very hard to cut, those kinds of things. Those are the types of medications I was on. And they said, you're on it forever. Whether your heart stops because you're not taking these medicines, or, whatever, they just weren't able or willing to um, help. And so I said, I'm going to die, whether taking these medicines or detoxing. And so every time I had a prescription to renew, I just didn't go and fill it up. And I did one medication at a time. And I was on lithium for bipolar disorder. And I wasn't bipolar. I had a traumatic brain injury, come to find out.
Lithium's not going to do anything.
And lithium was the hardest. That was
Yeah.
the one that I kicked last. And that almost got me. But I survived, thank goodness. And I did it. If you know my story, you're soon going to hear my story. I bought an old school bus off of Facebook Marketplace. And in the middle of that demolition, I detoxed. And so every day, sweating it profusely and going through those tremors and stuff, I gutted a school bus and turned it into a tiny house.
Who was around when you're detoxing, self-detoxing? Who was around you? Just kids?
I was going through art school. Yeah, I'm divorced. I'd been divorced since my son was 2 and my daughter was 5. So, it was just me and a few friends that may have known, but didn't really, I'm in college. Nobody really knows what's going on. I was a part of the veteran center at my college. And so, those are the people that would be like, I think you have a problem. You know what I mean? But the whole detoxing process, I didn't tell anybody. None of my family knew. It was very, I was ashamed of what I had done and
Right.
how I got there. And so I did it all alone.
Yeah, you say you're ashamed, but it's no fault of your own.
And now, that I'm so far out of that mindset, I understand. But, the guilt and the shame that I felt of what I put my children through, I'll never get over that. But I logically know that it wasn't my fault, but, you hold on to those things forever.
Yeah, you definitely do. And I mean, it's such a built-in, of course, I'm going to use the word I probably overuse on the show, as a built-in stigma, because it's so easy to fall into that addiction. Especially when you have a
Absolutely.
doctor telling you, no, this is what you need. And you're just, okay, doc. I mean, you're the professional. So I'll take what you tell
Yeah.
me to take.
Exactly. And, like I started out taking them the way that the pill bottle said, one a
Hmm.
day for pain, one a day for anxiety, one a day for nightmares, one a day, like I took them exactly as they were prescribed based off the symptoms that I was having. And then, you're getting used to it. So you're self-regulating. And then instead of one pill a day, you're cutting one in half. And
Hmm.
then you're going back and, that kind of, that very little and slowly you're kind of getting more and more and more. And, when they're giving you a bottle for, an entire month and you're going through them in, a week, there's obviously a problem, but then you go back and they give you even more,
Yeah, that's
and
what I was
so
going to ask about. I mean,
I hope
you're going back
the
with
system is getting better, but it was there was no questions being asked. I
right.
would go in early or make early appointments and say, I have, 2 weeks left, but, I'm busy. I'm a single mom with kids. Can you fill my prescription early? Those kinds of things. And there was no question.
So there were no questions asked by the VA, and they just turned a blind eye
They
and filled
just
your
kept saying,
prescriptions. And I know from brief military experience that you do walk out with huge amounts of drugs when they
there
think
was
it's
a video
necessary.
there was a video someone shared with me recently. It was a woman veteran and she's talking to Congress and she just picks up her purse and starts stacking
Mm,
bottles on
right.
the counter, talking to Congress and being like, I'm a nurse and this one is for this and this one is for this. And because I'm educated, I know if I take this medication with this medication, this is going to happen. I'm going to have a heart attack, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not a nurse. I'm
No,
an artist
right.
at the stem of it. You know what I mean? So if they say take this and this and this,
Just do it.
at the same time, I'm going to take them and come to there's a lot of research. And let's be honest, veterans are like the first guinea pigs for a lot of these medications and
Hmm.
stuff like that. That's how this kind of spirals out of control.
It's like the VA is a pill mill. Just not
I
asking
can
questions.
guarantee I haven't read a lot about it, but I can guarantee the pharmaceutical companies have some kind of grip and hold,
Right.
try this medicine or we'll give you this medicine for a discount or whatever. And, you know, I'm a penny pincher too, but there's certain things that I'm not going to be penny pinching on, and medication is one of those.
So you decide to self detox, and you do it in your bus.
Yeah.
You're renovating. What the fuck is that like?
Very hot days, very sweaty, very, what you would think a detox is. That's what I was doing, whether it was at home or I was going through art school, which also really helped with the realization of, this new life that I needed to create for myself. That's talking to one of the professors was how I got into the veteran art making, kind of thing. And my thesis was, like you see a lot of art stuff and you're like, what is that? Or why is that sculpture? That's such a waste of money. Or what even is that thing? And so I wanted to make art that was usable and had a purpose. And so I was making cups and bowls and furniture for my apartment and that kind of stuff. And I needed a home for my children. And so I bought a school bus and was building this home. And so the detox process was just a lot of that mental health recovery stuff that I was doing on my own and in art school and talking to professors and making and creating was that natural holistic mental health recovery that I needed. And so all of those kind of things kind of wrapped all together. And in this school bus is where I got clean and was able to um, kind of move on eventually from that.
How in totality, how long did it take?
Um, it was probably a good 6 months of like the shakes kind of simmering down and the constant thinking about like man, if I wanted to, I could just back and refill everything because they didn't know, that I had this thing. I mean, it's been 7 years and I've just recently started to go back to the VA and they see all the prescriptions I was on. And the lady was so willing to refill them all. And
Yeah.
I'm like, lady, I haven't taken these drugs in 7 years and you're going to give me all of this again at the same dosage that I was at the peak of my addiction. Like, okay, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. How
But
easy
I
it would
now
be.
have the voice and to be able to be like, no, that's not for me. But at the time, I so quickly could be able to just walk back in. And that was the hardest part, that it was right there. And
Mhm.
I had to gain the self-control to be able to say, no, that's, if I do that, I'm going to die. And that was just kept playing in my head. The alternative for my kids and where they would go, that kept me uh, clean, really. You have to, pick something.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of veterans are now getting service dogs. They're not going to kill themselves because they have to take care of this animal. And that kind of replacement of I'm not taking care of myself, I need to take care of other people. Naturally, mamas have that kind of built in, and I had to just keep replaying that in my head to stay clean.
So tell me about that first bus.
So I bought a 1997 Bluebird All-American from Toms River East High School in New
In
Jersey
New Jersey,
for
yeah.
$5,000. I didn't have much of a savings and that was all of my money, but I was, taking a gamble on this life that I had been dreaming about and this freedom and this, adventure that I wanted to show my children because all they knew was scary Sergeant mom that would come home that was a drug addict and angry, and I had no husband to take it out on. So of course these two little souls were, the punching bags for that. So I bought this school bus and gutted it out and started documenting on social media just for my own, with drug addiction and that kind of stuff, memories get blurry and like, how did that work or what happened or what steps were I doing? And so I just started kind of taking my skills from being a combat cameraman and documenting it on social media. And so I just have hours and hours and hours of footage of me trial and error, learning tools and, watching YouTube videos on how to even build a home in a school bus and that kind of stuff. And focusing more on the learning and growing and the end product really kept me grounded and being able to stay clean.
Well, you really have two documentaries. I mean, you have the bus build and you have a detox on camera.
Oh yeah. If I pull up some of that old footage, I don't recognize myself, like I'm like, that's not me, but it was me. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
can see it in my eyes. There's no soul there. I can see it in how pale my skin was or how broken out I was, and those kinds of things. And I'm like, I cannot believe that was me, but it was.
So how long does it take you to fully do the bus?
So the first bus I built for 2 years and it wasn't even completed. Built it up to be safe and able and running for my kids.
Hmm.
And I drove away in the school bus, meaning to come back to art school. But COVID hit and I started driving around the country and never came back.
Yeah. So that journey is documented on your website and through
Yeah.
through your social media. And what was the purpose of driving around the country?
You'll get this like, military dark humor kind of thing. In the very beginning, the first couple of weeks of COVID, everybody is scared and like,
Mhm.
what's going to happen? And the earth is about to explode kind of mentality. And I was like, well, if we're all fucking dying, I'm having fun. You know what I mean? Like I didn't just spend 2 years of my life building this thing for me to just poof into smoke and like we all die. So we started driving around the country. Everybody was like, stay at home, stay away from people. So we were in the belly of national parks, far away. We were out in nature and hiking and, going to aquariums and there's nobody there. And so we're just getting you know, the $1 million tour of these, establishments because they need the money and they're bored.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So that was our beginning journey, was just not dealing with people at all these really people infested places and being able to really soak it in and get that clarity and really focus on what's important and, those kinds of things. And being able to, I traveled all around the world, defending our country and, telling the stories of our country, but I had never actually explored our country. And so that was a way for me to, go to all these places I saw on National Geographics and tag along to kids that were learning about it in school and reading about it in textbooks and then being able to go and actually show them the places that they're learning about.
Not only do you get to do it, but you get to do it as in a private theater, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Like now, if you go to, I don't know, say Yellowstone, there's 10,000 freaking
Right.
cars and, all of your photos are just packed with cars and you barely see bison or, you're definitely not going to see the wolves, there. But when we were there, we got to see those things without other people kind of interfering with nature. And there's no way to, replicate that.
So how does that trip start to transform into what you're doing now with the traveling studio and the nonprofit?
Right. So when I was in art school, I took a class and it was pretty much using your art skill and giving back to the community. So a lot of people, like a lot of the young students, were painting murals or, painting this or that or, donating their time here and there. And none of that really clicked with me. I'm like, I'm not a painter. Why would I paint murals? And I'm not this. My BFA was in sculpture and ceramics with a concentration in metal fabrication. Like, there's not much in town that I could do, whether or not, that was at a museum or something. And so I talked to my professor and she said, well, where is your community? And I said, veterans. That's my I'm in class for this hour. And then as soon as I'm done with class, I go to the Veterans Center and decompress and chit chat with veterans. And then I go to class and then I go back to the Veterans Center. And so we found a place called the Servant Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, that is a homeless shelter specifically for veterans. And it's a treatment facility. And so I started volunteering there and then, painting walls and, pulling up carpet and, those kinds of things. And eventually started teaching art classes there. And those guys really inspired me to take this on the road and be able to provide what I was providing them in a very brief meeting, and be able to do that across the country.
So how do you do it? I mean, you've said you spent your last 5,000 on a bus and then you spent 2 years renovating it. So how the hell do you do it?
So I was in college and we lived very frugally, and obviously college is paid for. My rent was paid for with the BAH, but I was also receiving Pell Grants. And so I built the entire bus on Pell Grants and ate a lot of ramen, didn't eat out, and I had a part-time job in a butchery, and just pieced together all of this money. And eventually when people start catching wind of what you're doing, they want to help and they hear your story and are inspired. And so a lot of it started on donation and really using the Pell Grants to kind of fund the big projects.
So how many states did you hit?
We have done 40 states in the last 4 years. And now we're here at our home base in Georgia.
And are you planning to travel more, or are you just, because of school and everything for the kids, you've kind of delayed it?
Yeah. So unfortunately for me, as just a human being, my kids, after a few years, were like, can we go back to regular school?
Yeah.
And like all mamas, we sacrifice our dreams and our hopes and everything for our babies. And so I bought an A-frame here in the North Georgia woods, and I'm trying to convert this to what the Painted Buffalo message is and have veterans come, drop their pack, tell their stories, and be able to create in a more, you know, um, a bigger space, but hopefully have more impact. The bus definitely has an impact because it's, it's quirky and
Mm-hmm.
everybody, I talk about the bus and then I say, okay, how's your mental health?
Right.
Tell me some stories. And we kind of, that's the like starting conversation. And then it kind of expands. And so now that I've had the platform and be able to tell my story across the nation, I want to have a place for people now to be able to come and get out of the world that they're creating in their little bubble. Veterans tend to stay home and hide and
Oh,
don't
yeah.
go out into town. But this forces you to come here and kind of get out of that element, fill your toolbox with the skills that you learn here, and then be able to take them home with you. And so that's always been the big picture of the Painted Buffalo, is to have a homestead retreat, artist retreat space. And it came a little earlier than I was planning, but we're right on track the way the universe is saying. So that's
So,
what we're trying to do.
hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
Here now.
So as I go through your website, and I've done it a few times, the thing that jumps out at me is the veteran served page where you're talking about where you've been, who you've spoken to. And it says 1,200 veteran interactions. When you say an interaction, what do you mean by an interaction?
So whether it's actually going to a veteran because they've contacted me online, and now obviously I'm home base and so we're not traveling, but what I would do is put on my website, this is the path my family and I are traveling. If you happen to be in any of these locations, please contact me so we can have a meetup. Or if a lot of coffee shops or art studios would contact me and say, I'd love to have a veteran night. Could you come and talk? And those kinds of things. And so I just planted those all around the country. But veterans are solo beings, they're team mentality, squad mentality, but when you're in civilian life, you're kind of alone. And so there's many times that I've stopped in at people's homes, or they say, I can't leave my house. I'm like, that's okay. My house can come into your driveway. All you have to do is walk across your yard. And they would come into the bus, we'd hang out, and you could just see the weight being lifted off of their shoulders. And majority of the time I would know they were in the Army or the Marine Corps or the Navy or whatever, but I didn't know what they did as a job. I didn't know what they saw, those kinds of things. But just when you say, hey, I'm a veteran, you're a veteran, your instant brotherhood is connected for life. And that is, kind of the stepping stones that I'm just trying to start, whether it's, in your community or on social media, or, eventually in this, community space.
This might sound like a simple question, but I think it's more involved than what it sounds. What does art do for them?
I think it's a space where you can tell your story and let other people see it, or you can just keep it for yourself. If you go through a lot of my social media, you won't really see, people will be like, well, what kind of art do you make? And I'm making art and drawing and telling my story in what people would call a diary. Nobody's reading your diary except you. And you're kind of just vomiting all of this poison out, what you're holding on to, into these pages. And that's what I'm saying is you don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to show your artwork to anyone. It's just for you to get it out of your soul and your brain and kind of burn it, throw it in the campfire after we have a hangout and let it go and let it be, kind of mentality. But if you do want to, take that artwork and use it, whether it's pottery and opening up a pottery store or selling your paintings online and having a job, then you can do that as well. I have on Instagram a highlight reel on there. And it's all veteran artists that I have found across the country, and being able to connect and tell your stories that way. And all of them are making a living off of creating and making. But it's, like, have you ever, like, if you have kids, you sit there and color with them, and by the time you're done, it's been 3 hours and you're like, what just happened? That is the mindfulness. You're disconnecting from all of the craziness that's happening in your brain, and you're focusing on coloring in these little teeny tiny spots, or just connection with your children. That is the mindfulness that I'm trying to get other veterans to connect with, on, their own level, and whatever creation they find fit. I'm not a painter. I really don't like to paint, but I like to work with my hands, and I like to build the buses, and I like to fabricate with metal, and all of that maker space type stuff is all art. And that makes you an artist to me.
So let's talk about your paint can project.
Yeah.
I understand the purpose. I think the purpose is exactly what you just spoke about, but how are you doing that with a paint can project?
So while we were in the bus, I had hundreds of ammo cans donated over time, and people would come visit me at festivals and that kind of stuff and bring ammo cans. And so what I was doing was filling them with art supplies. And then eventually I've started to work with other companies to add stuff, whether water bottles or soldier socks. Every paint can I create soldier socks puts a pair of socks in there for a veteran, which is incredible. Berkey water bottles. Every ammo can has a Berkey water bottle. Things that are veteran friendly and veterans like. We all like t-shirts. We all like cool caps. We all, those kinds of things. And then the only gig is whatever's in your ammo can. Tell me a story. It doesn't have to be a military story. It doesn't have to be a bad story. Just tell me a story with the art supplies that are in there. And so then I was just getting, all of this, footage and stuff like that of veterans creating. And, they're like, I'm not a, painter or whatever. And so I would send them a coloring book for them and their kids. And then they would just sit there and color with their kid. And they're like, this is the first time that I've had a conversation with my kid in a month, and I'm like, that's insane. Like, especially dads and the connection,
right.
Veteran dads. I've heard a lot of stuff, about connecting with your children, especially, when you're serve in the service and stuff like that, and you're taken away from your families. I'm trying to, put families back together. And a lot of veteran outreach programs, the veteran gets to go and do the fun thing, whether it's camping or hiking or fishing or whatever. And for me, I want all of your friends and all of your family to come and hang out, because we're building a community, and your own personal community is what we're trying to grow, out there, and kind of fill that ammo can and that, personal care package specifically for you.
So when you say a veteran can get a paint can, are there qualifications as a veteran, or just anybody that's a veteran?
Any veteran.
Okay.
And, a lot of them you'll find, combat veteran or this, or, there's all these segregations, or you have to have an honorable discharge or this or that. If you were in the military and you have a very brief conversation with somebody, if they're lying or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's, you know what I mean? And so very quickly I have a conversation with somebody, and if I'm like, they're a veteran, they qualify. There's no discrimination, whether, because I have a lot of gay friends and gay allies, and they got kicked out of the military and got a dishonorable discharge, but they didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? There's so many reasons. And a lot of veterans are getting kicked out for being drug addicts. Well, how did they become drug addicts?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So even that stigma of a dishonorable discharge, I just don't want to hold any light to it. And so anybody that served their country, whether it was a year or 20 years, I want to be able to give them a space to tell their story.
You say that you kind of said dishonorable discharge, and it's kind of interesting because what created that dishonorable discharge in the first place? And could it be underlying issues that you can take care of through this anyway. So why would you ignore that?
Exactly. And, like there's some veterans getting kicked down for fighting, doing whatever. And I understand, but the majority of veterans, when you really talk to them and get like, why did you get a dishonorable discharge? A lot of it stems from mental health issues, drug addiction. And, let's be honest, a lot of us don't join the Marine Corps because we have this picture perfect family that we're, running away from. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's underlying issues of why we joined and served our country for whatever reason. So, and that's the same as, you see a lot of these programs, if you're in prison or you're a felon, you can't get a job forever. And that's so fucking insane to me.
It really makes no sense, does it?
So it doesn't make any sense to me. And I understand there's a lot of things that you can't be rehabilitated from. I am on board with that. But, if somebody's coming to you and they say, I need help, that's the hardest fucking thing to admit, get out of the denial. And if they're willing to have that bravery to say, I need help, then I'm going to do everything I can to help them.
So for any veteran listening, how do they go about contacting you about the paint can if they want to do a project?
Yeah. So now that we're here at the home base, I'm now being able to reach more people because of the mailing system. In a school bus, we don't have a mailbox. It's hard to you can't really ship ammo cans. It's a whole thing. So I'm now creating
that's a little fishy.
wood. It's a little fishy. And they pop with the, air regulation and that kind of stuff. Had that issue in the bus. A lot of it sounded like bombs going off, but it was just the ammo cans decompressing. And so now I'm starting to mail them out. And so if you want to receive a paint can project box, you just contact me any social media. If you email me, if you send me a message, a DM, anyway, call my phone number. It's just me. I'm a one-man band. And so I'll be able to hook you up with a paint can and be able to, start this journey.
It's interesting. I'm gonna go back because you said the veterans are very solo people, and it's hard to get them to leave home unless but they're very team oriented as well. And I think that relates very well to first responders as well. I mean,
Yes.
kind of I think with the veterans, you go through this, especially if you're a combat veteran, you go through this experience where nobody else on that street is going to relate to what you're doing or what you've seen or or what might come out of your mouth by accident. And it's the same thing with some first responders as well. You don't relate to what somebody has seen. You don't relate to whatever fire or CPR or dead person or whatever. You just don't relate to it. And so they're afraid of what they're going to slip up and say, or you've learned your lesson not to say anything in front of people because sometimes the dark humor you reference, it just slips out because it's second nature.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very interesting, the
Or,
similarities.
I went from the Marine Corps to art school and then in the schoolie community. And although I've connected now with a lot of nomad veterans, I'll say an inappropriate sexual joke and you could just see their face
Yes.
what the fuck? They just, and I'm like, I'm kidding. Calm down. Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
You're all right.
Mess you up?
No,
Okay.
you're fine. I just paused the recording here. Well, I'll just start it again real quick. Resume recording.
Recording in progress.
There you go.
Sorry.
No, you're
All
fine.
right, we're back.
Yeah. Well, we kind of expected that something like that would happen, so it's not a big
Yeah,
deal.
for sure.
Yeah. And editing is wonderful, as you well know.
Yes.
So it looks like you
Thankfully.
don't make mistakes, but I make a ton of mistakes.
Oh, I
So-
make them. That's the big thing with my kids. They're like, oh, I messed up. Or that. I'm like, dude, I'm 37 and I fuck up today. Whatever. Don't even fret. You're 12 and 15.
You've got
It's fine.
time. Yeah. So where did we drop off at? I forgot what.
Mailing paint can project boxes. So my goal is to be able to now reach more veterans and because traveling my school bus, I only am going to certain places, certain towns, and physically being able to give paint can project cans to people that I actually get to meet, those 1,200 veterans that I was
Right.
able to meet across the country. And this way, I'm able to, even if we're not physically able to meet, whether it's on Zoom or having a little get together like this, or starting a little community, group chat or whatever, and then being able to send paint can project boxes out to veterans for them to join this, community that we've got going on. That's my goal, is to be able to reach as many veterans that want to, join in on this initiative that we have going on.
So you bought an A-frame in North Georgia, you
Yes.
said. And is that a project as well for you?
It's for sure a major project. So it was a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom log cabin. As you can see, here, that's what my entire
Right.
cabin looks like, is orange like this. And so I've started, if you look on social media, I'm starting to document, painting the A-frame, and now we're homesteading and kind of learning and growing in that aspect. And that's what I want to kind of, give light. When I meet a lot of people, and especially veterans, they're like, I'm not an artist. And I'm like, if you're making something or using your brain and your hands at the same time, which is a skill that you're constantly doing in the military, or if you're a first responder, you're very, very quickly thinking and then action oriented. Those kinds of things is what I'm trying to kind of cultivate, whether it's making and playing with clay or painting, or, building what I call the duck condo here, building the property, those kinds of things. Making and creating and being an artist, is the definition is endless. And whatever you're, wanting to do, you can do it. I've now started this whole builder of a life worth living kind of mentality. And that's what we're trying to kind of instill in people now. And also, keep it the original theme of the Pink Can Project and all of that.
And you mentioned, so you're not traveling with the bus and you're not going to people, but you want them to come to you now. And so how are you going to set that up on your property? What will that look like? Will it look like how much space are you thinking that you would have for people?
So I have 6 acres, and there's 60 acres next door that I would really, 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 really love to invest in. And it's all woods. So it's all open. The 60 acres next door, one gentleman owns it, and he's never built anything on it. And so he's also a veteran, an airborne guy. And we're in discussion about how I can acquire or slowly buy or buy in pieces that land over there. And I'll be able to set up, whether it's bell tents or tiny homes or anything like that, for veterans to come and hang out and bring their family and create this commune of dysfunctional folks, kind of hang out and get back to that root that we find, in the military. A lot of, smoke pit chronicles, everybody's just hanging out, talking about the shit that they just went through at the smoke pit. For us, it would be a campfire, or, 2-man tents, and kind of embracing the suck of wherever you're, miserable, whatever. That would be, tiny houses here, and kind of, using the military kind of like themes and language, and kind of, bring back some memories. But, like the military, a lot of people ask, oh, how was the Marine Corps? I'm like, it was really shitty and really amazing, all in the same sentence. And, that's what we're kind of trying to, build here. It's a lot of hard work, but it's also really fun.
So you've got that. Are you still working on buses?
I have a yellow school bus sitting in my workshop right now.
What's your plan with that?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Financially, it's not available to build it out for me. I would really love to. It's my friend's, and he bought an extra school bus. It must be nice to be able to
Bought an extra
buy
one.
a school bus and be like, oh shit, I don't have time for this. So it's been sitting here, and I said, well, if it's sitting in my workshop, I'm going to tinker around. So I've gutted the whole thing. I've added a few, things here and there. And I would love to make it a traveling studio to be able to do weekend warrior type stuff, or go to events, or, like in big cities, we have, like the silky hikes and, those kinds of events. It would be really fun to dip into those, but financially, I'm just not able to. And I could possibly build it out for a veteran, simplistic or as elaborate as you want. I've had a few offers, but a few fell through. So it's an open-ended, just like everything, Semper and Gumby, here we are, just kind of getting through everything.
What's the average cost to build a bus?
It depends on how much you want to spend, really. The basic bus, you mean, just like buying a school bus? Now that it's become
It's a thing.
like a thing,
Yeah.
bus prices are slowly going up. But, a basic regular school bus is 5 to 10 grand. And that's cheaper than a lot of, you'll see van life sprinters. They're starting at 80.
Right.
Just a blank slate of a sprinter van is starting at 80. So 5 to 10 for a school bus. And it's bigger and you're way more safe, than an RV kind of thing. There's benefits that come with the cost.
So
and then it's whatever you want to invest into the motorhome type stuff. So my first bus, I, spent $15,000 and it was me, 2 kids and 2 dogs and a cat. And, we lived the same life that the $100,000 RVs and buses, we were living the same life in our $15,000 bus. Where the second one was all the mistakes, I kind of fixed them in the second bus and added, a lot more. My solar system to be off grid cost as much in the second bus as my entire first bus. So, there's a play that you can go redneck to bougie, like you can go as fancy and elaborate or cheap as you want, but cheap doesn't mean that it's not functional and pretty. You can. It's just kind of what you have available for you.
So you think back on the years that you traveled on the bus with the family and you're going to veterans and you're meeting with people. Can you narrow it down to maybe what's your most impactful moment of that time?
And the most impactful was just like seeing my kids see me not becoming soft because I'm still the Marine Corps mama, but being able to laugh and chit chat and like conversate on things that, are interesting to them. Where back then I was just like, I don't give a shit about that. Who cares? You're playing makeup and watching you. Like, that's not fun for me. But I'm now able to like sit and watch all these YouTube videos about, costume makeup and stuff with my daughter, or, look at rocks and dinosaurs and go fishing with my son, because those are things that are important to him. But back then when I was, in that mindset, unless it was a mission and here's the plan and here's the steps and here's the logistics, I couldn't like open my blinders outside of, and just fucking chill. Just sit down and stay still and just hang out. I wasn't able to do that. And so, living vicariously through the adventures my kids got to do or whatever kind of lightened my load. And really I was able to focus on the things that actually mattered. And the things that actually mattered were them, bottom line. And so being able to kind of inspire other veterans to kind of let go and let loose a little bit, but also have, determination and, a little, all of those things you get from that service. I don't want to let go of my stubbornness and my hard working and my work ethic and all of those kinds of things. But also like, I'm here all day. Like I could chill for a second.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Taking a moment just to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the podcast are you doing? Is that still active or what's the deal there?
So before I started traveling, I was recording a podcast and I was just speaking to veteran artists. And although there's a lot of us, there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of us. And so I now began kind of talking to people that are just building, like builder of a life worth living. and kind of stepping outside of that mold and that box and being able to, you know, live this life that we all, I get tons of messages. You're living my dream life, or you're so inspiring. I wish I could do that. And being able to talk to people that have made that leap of faith and they've come out on the other side and just show that people can do that. I literally was 6 feet under digging my own grave. And here I am, a homeowner, and have my farm animals and living deep in the woods, just like I like alone, and also my kids are thriving. And from where we came from is, where a lot of people kind of find me on the internet. And I want them to see that they can, do it too. So whether it's builders of, this cool life, or schoolies, or tiny houses, or homesteads, or all of those kinds of things, just want to, talk to people and hear their inspiring stories. Because when I hear those stories, it also keeps me going as well. Because, I've gotten a little burnt down on the road and traveling full time and, taking breaks and here and there. And then I talk to a few people and then I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm going to do it again, So having those conversations to be able to, keep myself going and hopefully inspire others to keep going as well.
Do you have any plans to travel, even like during the summers when the kids are on a break or anything?
I hope so, but house ownership is a lot more expensive
It
than
is.
bus life.
It is.
And so I am in search of a job and those kinds of things. And that's a thing I'm talking about on the internet right now, is transitioning out of the military and finding a job is kind of difficult. People are like, well, just go and apply to Home Depot. Motherfucker, I applied to a Home Depot 100 damn times and I can't pass the personality test.
Yeah.
Like that's just a thing that is people aren't really talking about. Or go work at McDonald's. Sure, but they know I'm 37 years old and have a brain, and they're trying to hire, 16-year-old kids that you can boss around.
Right.
It's just not,
No.
a thing that is an easy, especially when, I've taken a 7-year hiatus from a full-time job. You know what I mean? And so that breach of, resume time, and, I have the nonprofit and I did here and there jobs and that kind of stuff. But the job market is slim and far between when you are looking. When I wasn't looking, it was everywhere. And now I'm looking and I'm like, shit. And I had a conversation this morning with a female veteran, and she's just graduated college off her GI Bill. And she's like, I can't find a job. I'm like, girl, I'm right there with you, man. So, that networking and this is what I want to do. Here's my resume, and kind of figuring that kind of stuff out. So once I get a job and able to kind of build this kind of place, and, I do want to travel and still continue. And my kids are now of age where they're asking about going to foreign countries and that kind of stuff, which would be incredible. I want them to experience everything I could possibly provide, and I'll do everything I can to provide it. So whatever it is, getting my kids to overseas and, maybe showing them they're very fucking privileged.
You're right. Yeah.
Even though they're and complaining because we have no internet here at the cabin, and they're like, my phone doesn't work. I'm like, oh yeah, you want to try that? Let's go to some of these places I've been. You'll be thankful, and then, my daughter's very into big cities and wants to go to the Eiffel Tower and all these places that she's seen me go to and stuff like that. And I just want to provide everything I possibly can for them. So, when money allows and time and one step at a time with that kind of stuff.
So before we wrap up, let's talk about, I know we've kind of talked about it as we've gone. What are your maybe some immediate goals and some long range goals? And I know that property there is a huge one, but what else is on the agenda for you?
Yeah, I mean, getting my kids graduated high school is a big, my daughter is in 10th grade and she's now in kind of college. She's she's had her whole life planned out since she was 5. She knows exactly what she wants to do. So getting her into college and traveling and that kind of stuff. And my son, I took him up to Alaska, and that was the first time he realized he could get paid for fishing. So now that's his life goal.
Great. The only
I
job
just
like
want to.
more dangerous than firefighting, basically.
Exactly. And he's like me, like heck with school. Let's go to trade, find a job that way, kind of, think outside of the box. Where my daughter is like, I have to get a degree. I have to get a piece of paper. I have to get the skyrise apartment in New York City. I have to go to fashion school, like all of those like huge things, which I'm working my tail off to get her there. And she's working her tail off to get there as well. Um, so just getting them, out of the coop, and then I'll have more money to travel, right?
Right. Exactly.
And to reach more people. But that's the main goal, is to get them established as good, productive human beings in the world. That's the goal for all parents, is you don't want to raise an asshole, right? Or, somebody with good work ethic, and get them out into the world and established. And then, this home base here. And, what you were talking about, do you want to travel? It would be really awesome. But we also have a zoo of animals here. And so, leaving the property is, tends to be a little difficult, but I love it. I sit every morning outside with my ducks and talk to my goats and hang with my dogs and cats. And, that's my piece, finding that ability to sit still and find peace in those quiet moments is really hard for me. So that's my goal. My personal goal right now is to be able to sit still and not have a project and not lose my mind.
It's funny that you mentioned that peace in the quiet moments, because I think that that's a similarity as well between first responders and veterans, is that finding peace in those quiet moments and allowing yourself to have the quiet moments without trying to fill that time with something.
Exactly. And it takes a good while. You know what I mean? Like, like I have a friend that is very into hiking out in the back country. And she was like, it takes me 3 days of hiking and just sitting before I'm like, and that is the same with us. That was a good thing with the bus where I'm like, I'm over this. I could turn on the bus and drive away. I'm a runner. You know what I mean? And this, with my roots dug in, I have this house and no ability to like leave. Yes, I can go to Home Depot and that kind of stuff, even though that's 45 minutes away because I'm so in the country. This gives me like that time and space to be able to sit still and be okay with not having all of this crazy stuff. And then when I get over those 3 days of just like craziness, that's where I'm able to focus and sit down and write a blog or, create content and really discuss with social media, what I'm going through. And if I'm going through it, I know other people are too. And that's what you find on social media. If I'm posting about it, it's what I'm, trying to work through in my own brain. And hopefully with helping other people, and connecting with other like-minded people, I know I'm not alone, and other people will find that they're not alone either.
So you mentioned the blog and social media. Give us your addresses and give us, wherever we can find you.
Yeah, so paintedbuffalostudio.com is my website. If you just go there, that's the hub of
Perfect.
everywhere.
That's easy.
But on social media is the Painted Buffalo. If you type that into Google or Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere, you'll be able to find me on social media there at the Painted Buffalo.
And I always like to wrap up with two last questions. And the first one is, it kind of relates well to how you started, because you said you had uncles that were in Vietnam. And the title of this show is based off of a novel about Vietnam. So it kind of ties in pretty well. I like to ask people about an everyday carry, something that you're going to carry with you that you feel naked without.
Yeah, people always comment because I always have sunglasses on my head. And it's really just to keep the hair out of my face. But I say it's so I always have safety goggles. That's just a thing that I cannot leave the house without my sunglasses. And why is that the thing? I haven't unpacked it yet, but that's the thing. Whether it's the cover, from the military,
Right.
or, that's just my, you're ready, locked and loaded.
Right.
I just always put on my sunglasses.
Okay, cool. I mean, that worked for me. What about a book?
So bizarre, but that's
Is
true.
is there a book that you've read lately or read in the past that you think is impactful and can bring some value to listeners?
Yeah, I am not an avid reader, but I have gotten really into Audible books,
Hmm.
and there's a book called The American Bison. His first name's Steven and some last name that I cannot remember right now, but it's his trek on a like bison are stagnant animals. Like you shoot them and they fall over. They're like cows. They're not going to run away. But he did an authentic bison hunt through the Snake River and weaved throughout this adventure. He told the history of the American bison. And everybody always asks why buffaloes. Those are my favorite animals. And I really stem a lot with the American history with bison and how they used and abused and discarded the bison. And that's how a lot of veterans feel about themselves. So The American Buffalo is an incredible book. And as a veteran, you'll be able to kind of pick out of the words of how American bison were treated and to really relate in your own story. I can guarantee it.
Awesome. That I had never heard of the book, so I'll check it out.
It's really good on Audible. That's how because I'm always driving the school bus, I'm
Right.
just listening to books, but he reads the book and I mean, his voice is just amazing and how he, emphasizes certain words, probably how he wrote it, how he wanted, when I read it, it's different than if you read the book, you're going to pick out, but how he speaks this book is just so beautiful.
All right, we'll check it out. Is there any parting words you want to share with us? Any thoughts? Anything you feel like we should have covered?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for doing this and really creating this community and safe space for, veterans and first responders to be able to come and chat. And I've listened to a ton of episodes now.
No, I appreciate it.
And, absolutely. And I think it's incredible what you guys are doing. And those stories that you have shared so far are just incredible and continue to inspire me to reach out and help as much as I can.
Well, I tell you what, if you have an idea of somebody who might want to come on and share, please feel free to share my name or to kind of make a connection for us, because I would love to get more veterans on that aren't just fire related. I kind of like to branch out into other things. So if you've got a couple of veterans that might be interested in telling their story, I would love to talk to them.
Absolutely. I also have a schoolie friend who's a former firefighter, so maybe I'll connect you with him
definitely.
as well.
I would love to
They're
talk.
out there.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
Well, go enjoy the rest of your day, and I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, take care. We'll talk later. We're out. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.